tragedy continues to strike Florida this week. There was this horrific shooting in Florida earlier this week. We can put B1 up on the screen. This is from the New York Times. I'm going to read from the article here. A white gunman wearing a tactical vest barged into a Dollar General store in Jacksonville, Florida on Saturday and fatally shot 3 black people in an attack that the authorities said they were investigating as a hate crime. Now, Ron DeSantis has echoed that. He said he's seen the details and that this is the manifesto, and this is clearly a racially motivated hate crime. So he's on the same page as law enforcement in that question. The victims, Angela Michelle Carr, 52 years old, Analt Joseph Legary Jr., known as AJ, 29 years old, and Gerald Deshawn Gallion, 19 years old, 21-year-old gunman with an AR-15 style rifle and a Glock handgun, as the New York Times says, both of which he purchased legally in Florida. So then Ron DeSantis, obviously as governor of Florida, this falls under his purview to handle the fallout. He did a press conference, and let's play some audio and video from this. You can see him getting booed after the press conference.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is here. We're going to ask the governor if he will come now and turn remarks.
Thank you for doing this. I want to just say to the councilwoman, I got you. Don't worry about it. We've already been looking to identify funds to be able to help, one, make sure there's adequate security for Edward Waters College. We are not going to allow these institutions to be targeted by people. Your policies cause this!
I said after the press conference, but clearly that was in the middle of the press conference. Definitely not after the press conference. Now, Republicans have looked at the media coverage of this, and Ron DeSantis is certainly going to be dealing, I think, with that situation going forward in the aftermath of this hurricane that we covered earlier in the show that's hitting Florida right now and will continue to be a huge process for the communities impacted in the days ahead, the months ahead, the years ahead. But Republicans saw media coverage of what happened there, and that's become sort of a news cycle in and of its own. This is Senator Mike Lee. We can put B3 up on the screen. He's responding to an AP journalist who said something to the effect of, Ron DeSantis had created the climate of fear, and the NAACP put out a travel advisory to Florida. And then, sometime later, there's the shooting, the racially motivated shooting of 3 black people. So tying A and B together, Mike Lee jumps in and says, SCOTUS effectively immunized journalists from public figure defamation liability in 1964. Over time, that immunity, coupled with political leanings of most journalists, had turned the news media into the communications assault arm of the Democratic Party. Now, I don't agree at all about—
What's his Exhibit A?
Yeah, I'll read it right here. It's the tweet from, it is from Steve Peoples, who said, Ron DeSantis scoffed when the NAACP issued a travel advisory this spring, warning black people to use, quote, extreme care if traveling to Florida. Just 3 months later, DeSantis is leading his state through the aftermath of a racist attack that left 3 African Americans dead. And I'll put the next element up on the screen. This is my colleague David Harsani writing at The Federalist and saying, essentially, there's nothing in DeSantis's rhetoric that would be responsible for motivating a racially motivated terror attack. And so the Republican response and the conservative response has become a news cycle in and of its own, basically saying to point fingers at Ron DeSantis for, the AP curriculum that we talked about here on this show, for other things in Florida, essentially, that the left interprets one way, and to connect it to a shooting is basically a smear, and that's what Mike Lee is arguing. I don't agree at all on the question of liability for the media. That's a much more popular, it's an increasing in popularity.
As a member of the media.
Right. Yes, it's a very self-interested, but for legitimate reasons, I don't agree with that at all. Ryan, though, this is going to be, in the future, this is going to be a problem for DeSantis. We've seen him in ways that Florida voters appear to like, turn the tables when questions like this happen and say, this is awful what the media is doing. But at the same time, he can't escape the scrutiny, no matter what happens.
Right, and so Mike Lee's trying to blame the NAACP for warning people that black lives are at risk in Florida, and then 3 months later, 3 black people are killed by a racist guy at a Dollar General, and he's like, he should be saying, well, NAACP was kind of right about that, right?
He's blaming the AP for regurgitating the NAACP's line sort of credulously.
And then you remember when Rick Scott, he did that really creepy thing where he's like, it's socialists and communists and everybody who believes in big government, stay out of Florida. I'm warning you, don't come down here. Like, that rhetoric also, like, come on, why you can't have a socialist, socialists can't visit Florida? Like, what do you can't, people who believe in big government ought to be warned not to go to Florida?
Yeah, that's
what are you talking about? But on the Ron DeSantis press conference, watching that, I'm thinking, you know, he has a responsibility as the governor. These are his constituents. Like, he made a choice that he was going to be as divisive as he possibly could and as partisan as he could, and that was going to be his kind of leg up in the presidential primary. That he was going to pick fights with Democrats / the media, which he believes to be the same thing, and fire elected prosecutors, in cities around Florida, and take over the curriculum, and on and on. He made that choice, and maybe it has 54% of the state behind him, but that means you might have 46% of the state vocally against you, even in a moment where just several years ago, everybody would come together.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an interesting contrast. And actually we've seen this with hurricanes past, that Ron DeSantis has, the way that he's approached tragedies like hurricanes under his governorship has been pretty well approved. It seems to have actually been efficient and a proper use of government, a useful application of government. And he's actually, again, emerged from a lot of those other tragedies, probably stronger politically, if anything. But we didn't used to see quite this level of polarization. It used to be that these things were unifying moments for various reasons, but his approval rating, this is as of July, a Florida Atlantic University poll had him at 54% of voters approving of the way DeSantis is handling his job. Then a strong plurality, 41%, saying they strongly approve, 41%. But to your point, Ryan, that means 34% of voters strongly disapprove.
1 in 3.
That's a lot of strong disapproval, which means he's generally well-liked in the state of Florida, probably beyond just partisan Republicans when you have numbers like that. But at the same time, that means the disagreement with Ron DeSantis is also highly, highly polarized. And I think as he continues running for president, that's only going to that will only become ratcheted up. That will only be stronger, the reaction to him. And probably some of his numbers, as he sort of flails on the national campaign trail, will bring his numbers down in Florida, I imagine, especially if you end up looking distracted. If you end up looking like you're treating tragedies as campaigns for a president, which as campaign stops on your presidential bid, that's a pretty bad look too. I haven't seen that so far. And I do want to say, I actually am in the camp where I think tying DeSantis personally, Ron DeSantis' rhetoric personally to what happened, I think makes no sense. But I also take the point that you were making, that is it insane for a journalist to say this is what the NAACP, a major organization, a major national powerful organization, was saying? I take that point too.
Right. Yes, I agree with all that. That Ron DeSantis is never born. You may very well still have this shooting. Andrew Gillum could be governor, and you might still have this shooting. At the same time, what Mike Lee ought to be asking is, why did the NAACP say that? Like, what is it that has happened between the NAACP and the Republican Party, which used to be allies, that led them to a place where they were issuing a travel warning to the state? And so work through that rather than blaming the AP for reporting on it and implying that there'd almost be some defamation in reporting. Even if there was no 1964 defamation protection, Mike Lee knows better. You're allowed to report what the NAACP says and does as a reporter.
It was definitely not the journalistic moment that I would be like, maybe we should look at defamation cases, because they didn't, people's, again.
And who's going to sue, Florida?
Yeah, right. And Peoples didn't, or DeSantis, I guess, like Peoples didn't make an explicit, he didn't really have to, but he also didn't make an explicit point of culpability. He didn't say Ron DeSantis created the conditions that the NAACP issued a travel advisory because Ron DeSantis is a racist and caused the shooting. And we actually do see journalists kind of crossing that bridge sometimes. So of all of the opportunities, I don't know that this would be one of them. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.